Next, we're going to talk about geographic subdivisions. Geographic subdivisions are used when you want to bring out the geographic aspect of a particular subject heading. So when the book you're cataloging is about a particular topic as it relates to a certain place, that's when you would use a geographic subdivision. Here are some examples of subject headings that have geographic subdivisions. For example, in the first one, the book you're cataloging, if you were using this heading, is not about all cemeteries everywhere, it's about cemeteries in Nebraska. Same thing with the second one. The book that this heading is applied to would not be about all families in any place, it would be particularly about families in the United States. Geographic subdivisions are designated by subfield Z in marked format. So let's look at the first example. It's a topical subject heading, so it has a 650 tag. The main heading of cemeteries goes in subfield A, and the geographic subdivision goes in subfield Z for Nebraska. The second one is also a topical subject heading, so it has a 650 tag. The main heading of families goes in subfield A, and then the subfield Z is for the geographic subdivision of United States. Now there are two ways that topics can be subdivided geographically. They're called direct subdivision and indirect subdivision. Direct subdivision occurs when only one geographic subdivision is used. So in this case, art in France or soil chemistry in the Arctic regions. These are both examples of direct geographic subdivision. There is only one geographic subdivision and it appears right after the main subject heading. Now you can also use what is called indirect geographic subdivision, and this occurs when you have two geographic locations and you put the larger one first and then this more specific one second. So if you had a book about art in Paris, you couldn't just put Paris directly after art. You need to have the subdivision for France in there first. Same thing with the second example. If you're talking about schools in Omaha, you need to have the subdivision for Nebraska first and then the subdivision for Omaha. And this is called indirect subdivision. And the subfield Z is repeatable, so when you're looking at these in marked format, you can see that there is a subfield Z for France and another subfield Z for Paris. And in the second one, there's a subfield Z for Nebraska and a second subfield Z for Omaha. Now the other thing that's a little bit different about geographic subdivisions compared to the other types of subdivisions is that you can't always subdivide every subject heading geographically. There are ones in which you are allowed to do so and ones for which you are not allowed to do so. And when you're looking at subject headings in the print version, in the red books, there will be a note right next to the heading that tells you whether or not you can subdivide it geographically. So in that top example, the record for pit bull terriers has a note in parentheses that says may subdivide geographically. So you can go ahead and use a geographic subdivision after this one. On the other hand, the record for commerce down the bottom says not subdivided geographically, so this one is not allowed to have a geographic subdivision after it. Now if you're not using the print version but you're using the authorities website that we have been using throughout this class, it's a little bit more difficult to tell whether or not you can subdivide a heading geographically. There is a one character represented by an I if you can subdivide geographically, and it's left blank if you can't, and it just appears in a string in the 008 field. And so you'll see that top example is our pit bull terriers heading again, and that I is there, so it means you can subdivide it geographically. In the bottom heading, that's our commerce heading again, and that same character is blank, so that means you can't subdivide commerce geographically. Now if you do happen to have access to the Library of Congress Authority records through OCLC connection, it's a lot easier to tell whether or not you can subdivide something geographically. I've been kind of staying away from using connection during this class because it is a paid product and not everybody has access to it, but I did just want to point out this particular example of where it's easier to tell whether or not you can subdivide a subject heading geographically. So there's a field in the authority records in connection, the geographic subdivision field, and if there is an I there, then yes, you can subdivide this particular heading geographically. So this is our pit bull terriers authority record again, and you'll see there's an I there. And here's our commerce record again, and if that geographic subdivision field is blank, then this means that you cannot subdivide this particular subject heading geographically. You can't use a geographic subject heading with it.